Mount Panorama, Bathurst. This is one of the few remaining truly great road racing circuits in the world. Put simply, this place is a driver favourite, and come 10:30 race day morning, this stretch of road is set to erupt. It all started back here in about 1938 as a scenic drive, and whether you turn up for the first time either as a tourist or a race driver and you take a trawl around for 60 kilometres an hour, the legal speed limit in your road car, it never fails to attract anything less than, wow, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Because this place is narrow, it's fast, it's concrete lined, there's no room for error, there's massive elevation changes, it's a track like absolutely no other. 170 odd kilometres an hour is the average lap speed. It's 6,200 metres of racetrack, 23 corners, depending on how you count them. And when you roar through turn one and head up Mountain Straight for the first time, grabbing gears to fifth, you reach 265 kilometres an hour. And it's at that point you realise this is not your average racetrack.
So after the run through turn two, you start a 200 km/h run up into a blind corner here, which brings us into the cutting. Now, this is one of the slowest corners on the track, but let me tell you, this is where Mount Panorama starts to get really serious. At the slowest point, this is the national speed limit here, about 100 km/h. You need to run the car right up hard against the wall and get really early throttle. Very, very important. You need to run the car wide, but not too wide, because you need to keep the car square, because just over the horizon there's that awful bump, and it is so hard to get over that flat, and particularly difficult on used rubber. There's 2 or 3 pieces of track in Australia that I think are really ballsy, and let me tell you, this is one of them. This 200 metres of track here is about as tough as it gets because of this bloody grate. We talk about this grate a lot, and why it's like a roller coaster ride down here. The car gets so heavily loaded that, in fact, the tyre compresses up and pushes itself into the roll cage in underneath the mudguard there. What that does, as you're steering, it overloads the power steering and tries to reef the wheel out of your hands. Remember, at that point, you're doing 190 k's an hour and only millimetres from the wall.
This is the famous McPhillamy Park, right at the peak of the mountain. You roar into here, 4th gear, about 205 kilometres an hour. Just to add a bit of spice, there's this giant lump in the road. It doesn't look so big when you're walking along here, but believe me, at speed you really notice it. At this point, the car rocks up onto 2 wheels, fires across the top of the mountain. Not that it bears thinking about, but on the left-hand side, on the other side of the concrete wall, there's a massive drop-off. Up at the peak of the hill, skyline. And if you didn't have the data to prove it in cold, hard facts, you wouldn't believe that the car's doing 210 kilometres an hour just prior to the driver putting his foot on the brake pedal. But the real story here is the wriggling that comes after, because you've got to make a transition down through these very fast S's and get back 2 gears so that by the time you get down to the dipper, you're in 2nd gear and the target speed's about 80 kilometres an hour. Another big story this weekend, a big safety improvement at Mount Panorama. Gone is the big gravel trap. It's now sealed, so when you run off, you can rejoin down here safely. This is the dipper, and it's just an amazing piece of racetrack. As I said before up the top, by the time you get down in here, the car's in 2nd gear and doing just 80 k's. But it leaps up onto 2 wheels quite violently, and you've got to be very careful because you're grip limited on the right-hand side. Have to be so careful not to steer into this concrete wall that you can see down on the right. At the same time, you're juggling the gear lever, searching for 3rd gear, driving through the gutter, and then firing off down towards Forest Elbow, and amazingly back to 175 k's.
Conrod Straight. This is the most iconic piece of roadway in the country. Over 1 kilometre long and 300 km/h. Not just the straight, but you turn the car at 300 km/h. And you put your foot on the brake pedal there for about 4.5 seconds, as hard as you can push it. And then you've got to do it all again 500 metres later at Hell Corner. Now, that's just a verbal description. Let's jump in with Scaife.
Welcome to Mount Panorama. This is the best racetrack in the country by miles. Hell Corner, back to 2nd gear. Nice. Gentle on the throttle, up over the curb. Up to 3rd. Exit speed about 130 k. Up to 4th. Up Mountain Straight. Over the rise, 5th gear. 240 kilometres an hour. Hard on the brakes. Back to 3rd. Into turn 2. Gentle on the throttle, up on the curb, 160 k exit, break it up, this is a good section. into second, right against the fence. On the throttle gently, up to third gear over the hump. Careful not to hit that fence. Under the tree, 170k, fourth gear. Into the best section. Reed Park through the grate. Use every bit of road. McPhillamy Park. Exit speed 190k. And over Skyline, back to third. This is fantastic. This run down through the S's. Over the dipper. Second gear. Up to third. Down to Forest Elbow. Brake it hard. Modulate the brake. Get it turned in. And on the Conrod. 140k. Third gear. Fourth gear. Fifth gear. A big run down the fastest set Australian motorsport. And the fastest corner for a touring car in the world. Flat out. Back to second. In the chase. Change direction. Up to third. Use all the road. 170 k's. Back down to Murray's. Final corner. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a very long day. 161 of those. It'll be a cracker race.